Hello, this is literature class for 8th grade for Wednesday, April 1st. If you have not already taken the quiz on Hephaestus and Aphrodite, please pause the video, and if you've read the stories, take the quiz and then come back and sort of review the stories to start off with. So from the story of Hephaestus, you know that Hera was hoping that this baby would be one that could sort of restore her relationship with her husband Zeus, because he'd had so many beautiful children with other women, and yet when Hephaestus was born, he was well pretty ugly, it says, so much so that she just decided to get rid of him and threw him off Olympus, and he falls for what seems like forever and hits the ground on the edge of the sea, gets washed away to sea, and then discovered by Thetis, who we know as Achilles' mother later on. And she teaches him, how to make fancy jewelry under the sea, and kind of serves as his mother. Wears one of the necklaces to a party of the gods, and when Hera sees it, she wants to know where it came from. And Hera hears Thetis' story and realizes this must be the child she gave up. So she brings Hephaestus to Olympus and wants Hephaestus to make jewelry for her, and tells Hephaestus that if he will, she will arrange for Aphrodite to be Hephaestus' wife, which is unlikely because if he's ugly, just as much as he is ugly, Aphrodite is gorgeously beautiful. So when Aphrodite shows up on Mount Olympus, all the male gods go kind of crazy, and Hera, seeing her, tells Zeus, "You must marry her off at once and without delay." So Zeus has the male gods make offers to Aphrodite, and they all offer her special things, but Hephaestus comes up and says what Hera tells him to say, and that convinces Aphrodite to accept his offer. He says, "I'd make a good husband for a person like you. I work late," which he doesn't even probably realize why that would be attractive to her. But if he works late, that gives her a chance to see all of the other gods who have made offers. So that's how that works. So for next time, we are reading the story of Prometheus. That's for Thursday, April 2nd. So be sure you've read that story and taken the quiz on Prometheus before you look at the video guide on Thursday. We're down to the last couple of stories in the Trojan War, and I think we'll probably be able to finish today. The first one is the story of Cressida, who again is the daughter of the Trojan oracle, Chryse, I think. Late the next afternoon, while the armies were skirmishing on the plain, Cressida crossed the lines, all unseen, and entered the tent of Diomedes. She found a slave girl there, heating water into a huge copper cauldron, a little pale girl whom Diomedes had captured in a raid 2 years before on the island of Tanos. The maidens of Tanos had squeaky voices and looked like little white mice, but Diomedes had kept her as a bath girl because her hands were so soft. "Are you heating water for your master's bath?" asked Cressida. "Yes, lady. He comes back all hot and grimy from the fighting. And blood spattered, too. You have no idea. And he wants his bath immediately, and he wants a cool drink and fresh clothes." "Well, that's heavy labor for so small a girl," said Cressida in her coarse, purring voice. "I'm moved to pity you. Now just disappear, and I'll do your work this afternoon." "Oh, no, lady." "Oh, yes, little girl. But I dare not do that. He likes things just so. He likes to be scraped of the battle filth with this ivory stick, and then he likes to be massaged in every muscle with warm oil, then anointed with cool scented oil, then blotted with the fleecy towel." "Well, these are demanding tasks requiring enthusiasm and skill," said Cressida. "Nevertheless, I think I can do them passably well, so off with you." "No, lady, I cannot, I dare not. He allows no one else to bathe him but me. He likes the touch of my hands." You are going to feel the touch of my hands, little one, and you won't like the feel of them, I promise. Now get out of here before I lose my patience. Here are 3 pieces of silver for you. I will not take them. I won't go. Cressida slapped the girl across the face so hard she knocked her off her feet, then grasped her thin shoulders, pulled her up again, and shook her until her jaw wobbled. Seizing her by the hair, she dragged her from the tent. Cressida held the little pale, weeping girl in both hands and looked down at her through the tangle of her hair. The slave girl was like a white mouse in the clutch of a beautiful tawny cat. You will keep away from the tent all night, too, said Cressida. You understand? If I catch a glimpse of your pasty face before morning, I'll whip you until you can't walk. Do you hear me, little mouse? Yes, lady, anything you say. Here are 3 pieces of silver. Go find yourself a soldier to kiss away your tears. When Diomedes returned then to his tent after the day's fighting, he found Cressida there heating water in a big copper pot. Welcome, my lord, she said. Did you have good sport today? He looked at her in amazement. Who are you? Do you not remember me, Diomedes? Many a time during the past months, coming to Agamemnon's tent for a war council, you found me there. Agamemnon's tent, Diomedes answered. Oh, yes. But then you are the priest's daughter, the one that had to be returned to her father because Apollo was shooting arrows of plague into our camp. I didn't ask to be returned to my father. It was his idea entirely. And now you see I have crossed over again. I have become attached to the Greeks, or rather to a particular Greek. To you, my lord, I have come back for you. He looked her up and down very carefully and said nothing. Let me help you off with your armor. Here is your cauldron all ready. Everything's ready. The ivory stick, the warm oil, the cool scented oil, the fleecy towel. I have acquainted myself with your bath habits, you see. Where is my bath slave? Here I am, said Cressida. I mean the little girl from Tanos. I sent her away. You sent her away? Don't blame her. She had no choice. I bribed her and she refused the bribe. I beat her and she couldn't refuse the beating. You will not see her until morning. But do you not know, Diomedes said, that you have richly deserved a beating yourself for meddling with my servants? I put myself in your hands, my lord, said Cressida, but why not let me take your armor off and bathe you? If you still want to beat me then, I'm at your disposal. Right now you must be weary. You're the daughter of an enemy, said Diomedes. Your presence in our tents brought disaster upon us, cost us hundreds of men. How do I know that you have not returned with some treachery in view? Oh, I do have treachery in view, she said. You are acute, my lord. I plan a massive betrayal, but not of the but of the Trojans and not the Greeks. As she spoke, she began undoing the latchlets of his breastplate. She drew off the heavy curved piece of bronze, then began to untie the bindings of his corselet. After your bath, when you are rested, when you have been anointed in cool scented oils and clothed in clean garments, and have drunk and fed, and your mind is unclouded by fatigue, then I will tell you what you most want to know, Cressida said. Later that night, when all the tents were dark, Cressida told Diomedes what she had done. To make it brief, my lord, she began, I come to you with those secret oracles which enwrap the fate of Troy, things which must happen or be made to happen before you can storm those walls and sack the city. How did you come by these oracles? From your father, the priest? Forgive me, but I've seen the man, my girl, and I don't believe he's the kind of man the gods really entrust their secrets to. No, not from him, of course not, but from Apollo himself, through Cassandra, whom the sun god confides in, even against her will. She confided in you, Diomedes said. No, not at all, Cressida said. She loathes me, with good cause. No, it was her brother Troilus she confided in, for I, wanting to come to you, and not wishing to come empty-handed, resolved to bring you a love gift you could not refuse. So I persuaded young Troilus. I asked the young prince to go to his sister Cassandra, and make her tell him the oracles and bring them to me. Well, why did Cassandra, who is so clever and who knows the importance of such oracles to the fate of Troy, why would she entrust them to anybody else? She is clever, poor girl, but she dotes on Troilus and can refuse him nothing, so just as I dote on you. Besides, the poor thing is accustomed to her prophecies being disbelieved. She is eager to cast the future for anyone who pretends belief, and this I instructed Troilus to do. Well, you are a very clever girl, said Diomedes. Love has sharpened my wits, my lord. Such love shows how stupid I am. So cleverness can come from stupidity, which gives me hope. I can tease some heat even out of your icy soul, king of Argos. The oracles, said Diomedes. Tell me the oracles. What must we do to take Troy? Well, two conditions are necessary. One of them is couched in a riddle. It says that Troy can finally fall only through an act of monumental piety, and it caps this riddle with a verse. The verse says, could is should is would is wood, of course. What began with an apple must end with a horse. Oh, it's too much for me, said Diomedes. Maybe Ulysses can figure it out. He has a head for such things. What's the other condition? I hope it's a little plainer, or we'll be here another 10 years. The other one is quite plain, quite simple. It says, Troy shall not be taken unless Troilus dies today. Today? Well, then it's too late, said Diomedes. It's after midnight. The day has passed. But before it passed, young Troilus has also passed over the Styx and into Erebus, where he will join all his brothers sent before him by you and Achilles. You mean Troilus is dead? I've had a very full day, said Cressida. Here's a little souvenir of it. She handed him a dagger. You see, my lord, it's a sharp dagger, and it's been used. It is encrusted with that which should be more precious to you than jewels, the blood of Troilus. Diomedes leaped up. He was a brave man, among the bravest who had ever lived, but now he was bathed in an icy sweat of horror. You killed Troilus, he said. He loved you, but then you killed him? You are Hecate's own handmaid, a witch out of hell. For shame, she crooned, a warrior to be so shocked at the idea of death. How many men have you killed, my lord? How many beautiful sons have you butchered and left in the dust? Why begrudge me my one, which is my love gift to you? How many times have you seen a cat who loves its master bringing him a dead bird or mouse to lay at his feet as a token of his love? So I lay Troilus at your splendid feet, my master, my king, my only love. His death is the key that unlocks the gates of Troy and brings you victory, as soon as Ulysses reads the riddle of that other oracle. Well, to kill an enemy in battle is one thing, said Diomedes, but to slip a dagger into his back while telling him how much you love him, that's something else. Foolish man, murmured Cressida, your enemies die in pain and terror. Troilus died in bliss. My arms were around him, my lips on his. He did not even feel the blade. If so happy a death could come to all men, it would lose much of its unpopularity. Which brings us to the last chapter, which is called the end of the war. This is how the prophecy was fulfilled concerning Achilles. Remember, it was said, prophecy was that if he killed Hector, then he wouldn't survive longer than 3 days after Hector's death. Priam came to Achilles' tent, Priam is Hector's father, to beg that Hector's body be restored to him for honorable cremation. The old king humbled himself before the mighty youth, knelt at his feet, and kissed the terrible hands that had killed his son. Achilles relented and promised to return the body, and this kindness was to kill him, because when he brought the body back to the city gate, Paris was hiding nearby. As Achilles lifted the corpse from his chariot, Paris loosed his arrow, which Apollo guided to the one vulnerable spot on Achilles, the great tendon behind the right heel. The arrow cut the tendon, killing him immediately. The promise Achilles had made to his stallions was kept. They were burned on the same funeral pyre and never had to know another master's hands on the reins. Ulysses, faced with the task of unriddling the oracle, prayed to Athena for wisdom. Whether she granted him new insight or refreshed his old cunning, he never knew. Well, the verse ends with these words, he said to himself. What began with an apple must end with a horse. What began with an apple? The war, of course. It was started by the golden apple of discord, which led to the squabble among the goddesses, to the judgment of Paris, to the abduction of Helen, all of which led to the 1,000 ships at Aulis and the siege of Troy. Well, then this war must end with a horse somehow, the oracle says. What horse? What kind of horse? The verse must tell. Let's see. Could is should is wood is wood, of course. Oh, the answer is wood, a wooden horse. This is what the oracle clearly demands, leaving everything as murky as ever. What can we accomplish with a wooden horse? Can we ride this wooden steed and jump it over the walls of Troy? Wooden horses are not noted for their speed or agility. Looking at it another way, maybe it's not a horse, but a statue. Yes, a statue to Poseidon, who's the father of horses. That's it. A statue so big that armed men can hide in its belly and be obligingly rolled by the pious Trojans right into Troy. This is what the oracle meant by a monumental act of piety. It all fits together. Thereupon Ulysses set a gigantic plan afoot, most cunning plot he had spun in all his artful career. On a beach hidden from the sight of the walls, he ordered carpenters to build an enormous wooden horse, varnish it to a last luster, and ornamenting it with gilded mane and hooves. It was set on solid wooden wheels, and a trap door was cut into its belly, big enough to hold 20 men. Then Ulysses, Diomedes, Menelaus, little Ajax, and 16 other of the best warriors hid themselves in the belly of that horse. They wore no armor and carried no shields, lest the clanking metal betray them. They were armed only with swords and daggers. Then the ships were rolled down to the water and launched. Masts were stepped, sails raised, and the fleet moved out of the harbor, behind a headland and out of sight. When they were hidden from view, they moored again to wait for a signal. When the Trojans awoke the next morning, they saw no tents on the beach, no ships, and no Greeks. The camp had disappeared. Even the cattle were gone, and the fires were cold. Rejoicing with loud shouts and weeping with joy, the entire population rushed out on the beach. No one at all was to be seen. After 10 years, the beach was Trojan again. The war was over. It was unbelievable, yet unbearable to believe anything else. They marveled when they found the giant wooden horse and tried to guess its purpose. "Read what's written there," said Chryseis. Cut into the shoulder of the horse were these words: "This is an offering to Poseidon by the Greeks, who after 10 years of war sail for home and beseech fair skies and following winds." So they're asking Poseidon for good weather to sail back. "Well, clearly this is an offering to Poseidon," said Chryseis. "If we take it into the city and set it in our temple, we shall be the ones to earn the favor of the Earth Shaker, who has been so hostile to us till now." "That's brilliant," said Priam. "It's the very thing." "No, it's fatal," shrieked Cassandra. That horse will devour Troy." But no one listened to her as usual. Another of Priam's advisors, a man named Laocoon, had other ideas too. "Hear me, O king," he said. "Beware of Greeks, even Greeks bearing gifts. I mistrust this horse. I mistrust everything an enemy does. Let us take axes and chop it to pieces." He was a very large and impressive, deep-voiced man. His words made Priam hesitate, and he might have convinced the king, except Poseidon took a hand. He sent 2 enormous sea serpents gliding up onto the beach. They seized the 2 small sons of Laocoon and began to swallow them whole. Laocoon leaped upon the serpents, but they simply looped their coils around him and crushed him to death as they finished swallowing his sons. "Let the impious take heed," said Chryseis. "These serpents were sent by Poseidon to punish the sacrilegious words of Laocoon. We must honor this wooden horse dedicated to the sea god, put flowers on it and take it into the city and put it in our temple." Awestruck by the fate of Laocoon, the Trojans did as Chryseis bid. That night the fleet put into shore again, the Greek fleet. Under the command of Agamemnon, the Greeks disembarked and waited on the beach. Exhausted by their rejoicing, the Trojans slept in their city. In the darkest hour of the night, Ulysses crept out. Seeing no one, he tapped on the horse's belly. Diomedes and the others slipped silently out of the trap door. Menelaus dashed toward the palace in Helen, followed by half the men. Ulysses led the others to the wall, where they surprised and killed the drowsy sentries. Then they set a signal fire on top of the wall, summoning the rest of the army from the outside. Ulysses descended and swung open the huge gates, and the main body of troops entered Troy. The old tales go to great lengths now, giving the names of the Trojans slaughtered in the sack of the city and the manner of their death. But it's sufficient to say that the men were butchered, the houses were looted and burned, and finally the women and children borne off into slavery. Of all the Trojan princes, Aeneas was the only one to escape the massacre. So Aeneas, a Trojan prince, escaped. Heedless of his own safety, he lifted his own father, Anchises, to his shoulders and carried him through the burning city. The Greeks were so struck by Aeneas's courage that they let him go. He boarded a ship and sailed away into a series of strange adventures. After years of hardship and incredible danger, he came to a fair land and founded a city later to be called Rome. Okay, so remember we said that the Trojan War is actually a long epic poem called the Iliad. There's another one called the Odyssey about Ulysses' return from the Trojan War. But there's a third one called the Aeneid, which talks about the adventures of Aeneas and how he founded Rome. And the ironic thing is, they let Aeneas go because of his courage, but eventually Rome becomes the city that conquers Greece. So if they hadn't let Aeneas go, it might not have happened. Going on, Cassandra was taken back to Mycena as Agamemnon's slave, but she was murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra. on the same night that she knifed her husband in his bath. Cassandra had warned Agamemnon that this would happen, but of course he didn't believe her. Paris was presumed dead after the sack of Troy, but some say that he fled and lived under other names in other lands, always protected by Aphrodite. Helen went back to Sparta with Menelaus and lived happily there as queen. She explained to her husband she had been abducted by force and kept in Troy against her will, and he chose to be convinced by her story. She kept her beauty always and was much admired by the princes of Greece, who often found occasion to visit the royal palace in Sparta. Cressida disappears from the legend after the war. It's believed that she was taken to Argos by Diomedes, but what happened to her, nobody knows. As for Ulysses, his real troubles began after he left Troy. It took him 10 years to get back to Ithaca, and the adventures were so many and so marvelous that they take a whole nother book to tell. The flames that consumed Troy burned for 7 years. They burned so hotly that the Scamander River turned to steam and hissed away. Poseidon himself retreated from their awful heat, shrinking into the sea. Where the beautiful waters of Troy's harbor once flowed is now a parched and empty plain. So that's the end of the Trojan War. Okay, so again for Thursday, in literature, you are reading the story of Prometheus. Read the story, take the quiz, and then watch the video on Thursday, April 2nd. Have a good day.